I think I'm good to go. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our work here in the west of Ireland. We've been running this project in one form or another for almost 20 years at the moment. So the place I live is called the Burren. It's a very famous place in Ireland. This is me. And I suppose our work here is with farmers, helping them to preserve and protect the landscape. This is what the Burren looks like around now. We have a lot of very interesting plants, some of them from the Arctic region, like this Dryas octopetala. We're located here in the west of Ireland, as you can see from the photograph. Now, the area I work in is called the Burren. It's a very high nature value landscape, and much of it is protected under European law because of its nature, its biodiversity. But it's also been farmed for 6,000 years. So there's lots of archaeology, lots of cultural heritage, some really interesting features. It's been farmed for a long time. And I guess what we're doing in our work is trying to conserve this landscape, this heritage, but also the communities, the farming communities that have created and sustain it. So the kind of farming we have today in the Burren is mainly beef farming, suckler beef. There's very few dairy farmers or sheep farmers, so it's mainly suckler beef. Farming is changing. It's becoming, I guess, modernized and more efficient. So for instance, many farmers now keep their animals in houses for the winter, whereas before that, many years, animals were kept outside during the wintertime to help graze these hillsides. So farming is changing, and that's having an impact on the landscape. So in recent years, and maybe since 1970, there's been huge changes in farming. And as a result, the landscape hasn't been able to adjust appropriately. So that's caused a lot of problems. So if you look at this picture, it shows, a close-up of the Burren. When we farm this too much, or when we farm this too little, we've got a problem. So as the farming intensity increases, you can see we start to lose a lot of biodiversity because of fertilizers and heavier grazing. Also because of different feeding systems, this can cause issues with water quality as well. So when farming goes too far, we have problems with biodiversity, with water, with soil health. But the other problem is that if we farm too little, a lot of this landscape changes back to scrubland and woodland. We lose again a lot of biodiversity. We lose a lot of our archaeology. This is a famous monument in the Burren, but it's disappearing under the forests now. So what we want to do is try and keep a balance between farming and the landscape in order that the farmers can produce food, but also in order that they protect biodiversity and the cultural heritage, the history. Now, the Burren is not the only place in the world to suffer from this. Even in Europe, in the European community, about 30 million hectares of land would be described as high nature value. And in these areas, you have the same problems, too much farming or too little farming. And as a result, the condition of these habitats is getting worse all of the time. Nor are these issues anything new. Over time, over history, farming has increased and decreased and the landscape has responded. But the big difference at the moment is that the scale of change and its speed is so big that it's having big implications on our environment and on our climate. So this is a problem that we're dealing with. Here's a picture of the Burren in 1900. Here's the same landscape you see today. So when farming slows down, the rate of encroachment of scrub increases. So what has our response been to this problem? Now you must remember this place that we work in is very famous for wildlife and flowers and monuments. So when this happens, when we lose this, it's a big problem. So our government have tried different things. First of all, we've tried to protect the landscape, saying that this is important and the farmer cannot damage it in any way. But that's important, but it's not enough. It's not enough to protect this landscape. So then the government introduced environmental programs. So we have a national environmental program, but it doesn't really work for us in the Burren because the landscape and the needs of the landscape are so different, so specific, that it doesn't really work terribly well. It doesn't address these problems. So what we decided that we needed was a tailored approach for the Burren with farmers at its heart, because farmers own all of this land, they own the livestock, they have the experience and the knowledge. So if we're to conserve this landscape, we need to do it with farmers, but we need to do it in a way that's particular to the Burren. Everybody okay so far? Siggy?
Yes, I think
everything okay?
Yes,
Good.
sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fergal. So back in 2005, we are in a similar position. We were in a similar position to yourselves in Iceland at the moment. We wanted to do something, but we didn't quite know what. So we developed a research project on 20 farms. It was called the Burren Life Project, and it ran for 5 years. So the purpose of this project was to develop a blueprint for sustainable farming, by which I mean farming which produces food, keeps the farmers farming, but also looks after the environment and the social structures of the Burren. It became a very successful project, partly because the farmers were really supportive. So this man in the photograph is a farm leader, and he decided that there has to be opportunities here for farmers. So we will support this project. So we got the farmers together with the agricultural authorities and the wildlife authorities to sign up to this program for 5 years. And it was a very interesting experience. We looked at some of the big problems that were causing damage to the environment. So this, for example, just one example of many that we have. A lot of farmers were feeding their animals outside with silage. We said, this is a big problem, causing pollution, you're damaging the soil, the animals aren't grazing anymore, so we have problems with scrub encroachment. Could you please stop doing this? But the farmers explained that the animals need more nutrition because of the breed and because of the calf inside, so they need to feed them something. So then we developed a new type of feed, a pellet, based on a pellet. And this pellet contains all the missing minerals and nutrients that the animal requires, but in a very concentrated form. So by piloting and testing this system, we were able to replace the feeding of silage and the damage done by a new feeding system, which is more efficient for the farmer and more beneficial for the environment. So it improved water quality, it improved levels of biodiversity because the grazing was better, and it also improved farmers' income and lifestyle. It was easier to use. And using that information, we were able to publish guidelines for how best to feed the animals in the Burren. So for 5 years, we had a lot of examples of that on our 20 farms, and we developed some good ideas. So after 5 years, we could show that these interventions, these ideas, that they really worked to improve the biodiversity and the heritage of the Burren. Because it involved farmers and was very practical, farmers really liked this approach. It made sense to them. They really supported it very much. And thirdly, as an outcome, we had a blueprint on how best to farm in the Burren and what cost that would be. So what every measure would cost the farmer to undertake. Now, the project was very successful, and it won the best ever Like Nature project in Europe in 2017. And as a result, our ministry decided to fund by €1 million every year the expansion of this project across the Burren. So just to recap, we spent 5 years working with farmers, finding solutions to the problems, the environmental problems, testing those solutions. And because it worked so well, we were given funding to expand this approach across the entire Burren region. So that's the first part of what I wanted to say. And now what I wanted to talk about, maybe for 10 minutes, is how we've applied these ideas to a landscape. So we began with 20 farms, but now we have 400 farms. So what did we do? And this is where I think it becomes very interesting. So with our new program, we get 1 million euros from our department every year to spend on farmers. And these farmers, to get that money, must improve the nature in the burn, must improve the cultural heritage, and must also improve water quality. So at the moment, 10 years later, we have 330 farmers on about 23,000 hectares of land. SAC is protected areas. So this is most of the Burren region, and most of the farmers are now participating in the program. Just one thing to say is that when we think about farming, and even when farmers think about themselves, it's all about food production. So we think of farmers as food producers. Farmers understand their job as food producers. But in a lot of parts of Europe, including Iceland as well, farmers, by managing their land and their livestock in a certain way, can produce other important outcomes like biodiversity, cultural heritage, managing water quality and water flow, storing carbon. And we call these ecosystem services is the term that we use for them. Now, food production is an ecosystem service as well, and it's the only one the farmers paid for. So the farmers are only paid for this food, and often they produce food at the expense of these other services. So when we were designing our program, we decided we need to put a value on these services. Therefore, the farmer has a choice to make between producing lots and lots of food, or else maybe producing a certain amount of food and getting paid, but also producing ecosystem services and getting paid for that as well. So when we designed our program, it was very different. So in the Burn program, which I manage, we have two types of payment. So one payment is for ecosystem services, for biodiversity, for water quality. And the farmer earns that payment by managing his land, particularly his livestock, in a way that improves the environment. The second type of payment we make is for work. So in order to manage the land and deliver ecosystem services, there are certain capital works that need to be undertaken, like removing invasive species, like repairing fences, improving the water management. By doing these things, you can improve the grazing and therefore produce more environmental services. So it's a twin track approach, two types of payment. And to look in a bit more detail, if you can see this image here, I've taken a picture of 3 different fields in the Burren. On the top left, you can see a field which is not really grazed much anymore. And there's very poor biodiversity in that. It's not interesting. It's become dominated by one species because it's not being grazed properly. Beside that, on the top right, you can see a field which has been overstocked, too many cattle, causing a lot of damage to the soil, to the water. And because they're eating silage all the time, they're not foraging, and therefore the scrub encroachment has happened in the background. In the third scenario on the bottom left, the farmer is managing his land in a very sustainable way. He's matching the number of animals with the capacity of the land. So every year, we visit all of these fields and give each one a score out of 10. Top left scores 4 out of 10. It's not very good. Top right is a disaster for the environment, so it's 0 out of 10. But on the bottom left, it's actually very good for nature and for biodiversity. It's balanced. It's very, very well managed. So we give it a 10 out of 10. For these top 2, we give the farmer no payment for these fields because he's not delivering enough for the environment. So no payment. For the bottom field, because he's producing a really important outcome, which is biodiversity, we give him a high payment, 180 euros per hectare is the payment we give him here. So when he manages the land well, he produces more ecosystem services and we give him a higher payment. A higher score equals a higher payment. Now, this seems a little bit complicated, but it's actually very simple. How it happens is every year, a farm advisor will visit the farm during summertime and look at 10 different things. It could be the level of grazing, the feeding system, the level of encroaching scrub, the condition of the soil, the condition of the water sources. the amount of weeds, the amount of dead material. And he'll put all those into a score sheet like this. That score sheet will be transferred into a calculator, which will yield a score of 10. So here it's 8 out of 10. Now, on average, it will take maybe 30 minutes to do this assessment in a field. So it can be very efficient. The advisor does that every year, and we then, my team and I, we validate these scores on maybe 20% of the farms. When we have a score, we produce a sheet for the farmer. Now, this is what the farmer receives every year. It's a list of his fields on the farm, and on every field, we give him some recommendations about management. We show him the area of the field and the score out of 10. And the score translates into a payment rate. So 8 out of 10 translates into 96 euros per hectare. Over 8 hectares gives you 796 euros. So every field is listed in order with score and management recommendations. When we tally up all the scores, we can see the total payment and the average score for that farm. And we can compare that score year on year to see if the farmer is improving or disimproving, and the payments will change accordingly. So the top payment is 10,000 euros, but the average payment, because not every farmer has enough land or gets 10 out of 10, the average payment that we pay every year is about 2,600 euros. So this for us works incredibly well, this system, because it gives the farmer an idea of what we want. It gives him an incentive to improve his management, and it gives him a clear reward when he delivers a certain outcome. In some cases, the scores are very low because of bad management in the past. So in those cases, or in any case, we give the farmer a second payment. This is for taking actions to improve the score. Again, this is a very simple sheet, one-page sheet with a map, and it lists a number of actions. So for instance, if the farmer has a lot of problems with scrub encroachment, these are invasive species, he can apply for funding to remove some of that scrub. So we'll mark it on a map, the farmer will remove the scrub, and we will pay him this amount of money to do that. By doing that, he's addressing a problem, and therefore he's helping to improve his score and his annual payment from the program. Now with these actions, we use unit costs. So farmers don't like paperwork, so we try and reduce the need for paperwork by the farmer. So every job has a standard price. If it's removing scrub or if it's repairing walls, there's a certain price that's paid so the farmer understands beforehand what the cost will be. We also help the farmer to get permission to carry out the work. So in terms of paperwork, for the farmer, there's none. All he has to do every year is to sign the sheet and claim his payment. It's very simple for the farmer. So here's an example of some of the work that the farmers do as part of the program. We never tell the farmer what to do. We tell him what we want as an outcome and then rely on the farmer to nominate works or do work that will improve those outcomes. So a lot of farmers repair walls, which is important to improve grazing. A lot of farmers remove scrub because it's a huge problem on farmers. So you can see here the machine beginning to remove the scrub, and afterwards the result of the work. We often remove scrub by hand because there's so much archaeology, we can't allow a machine to do it, so we pay more money for this type of work. Other work would be improving the water condition. So for example, if a farmer is polluting a spring on his farm, a water source on his farm, his score is going to fall by 1 or 2 points. So by repairing the water sources, by maybe harvesting water from the rainfall or storing water, he can improve the condition of his water sources, improve his score, get a higher payment for his field, and also get funding to carry out the work. Other work would be improving access to the site so that the animals can get onto the site and the farmers as well can get onto the site. And by doing all those works and by improving the grazing again, by increasing grazing in most cases, the farmer can create a very good score for his field. Now this photograph here is from a site that looked like that. So by changing his feeding system, by improving the grazing, the farmer produces something like this. And we're not saying that we want you to stop farming and focus on nature. What we're asking for is for the farmer to produce an additional, not an alternative product, but an additional product. And we guarantee the price for 5 years. So as well as producing beef, Burren farmers are now producing ecosystem services, including biodiversity. And we guarantee them a price every year for 5 years, which is really important. Not just the amount of money, but the guarantee that you will get this price if you deliver the product every year. Just to show you, Siggy, you're still with me? You can hear me all?
Yes, we are good.
Good. Okay, so I've maybe five more minutes.
That's okay.
We've got a lot of really good data from this project. It's a substantial project, and we can track, when you think about the field score, we can analyze that field score at a field level, at a farm level, or at a program level, and we can track whether it increases or decreases every year. So this simple graph shows you the change in score from 2010 to 2019. In 2010, the average score is about 6.8. Now it's about 7.6. We can show that in this graph as well, which shows the area of the burren, the difference in the area per score between 2019 and 2010. And here you can see that the area of the burren scoring 8, 9, and 10, which is really, really good, above average, has increased, whereas the area scoring below 7 and below has decreased. So that gives us really strong evidence every year as to the impact of the program. As well as the scores, we can analyze the amount of work done. So the amount of scrub removed, 205 kilometers of pathways opened up through scrub, 127,000 meters of wall repaired, 850 new gates, 530 new troughs, and so on and so on. All of this work, by the way, is co-funded by the farmers, either 25%, 50%, or 75%. So farmers, if they want to do work, we will give them some funding. If they don't, that's fine. So it's interesting that of our farmers, only 60% of them actually do work, the others don't. So again, this gives us very good impact and value for money. Those that don't want to do the work, we don't pay them. The economic impact has been very significant. About 9.2 million euros has been paid, as well as 2.1 million of co-funding from the farmers. The average payment is around 6,000 euro. Now this is in addition to other payments. So for environmental management, the average payment for our farmers is about 10,000 euro. 6,000 from our program and 4,000 from the national program. We pay farmers since 2010. We've given them almost 6 million euros for the management, for the results. We've given them about 5.5 million euros worth of work. We've brought a lot of business for local suppliers because most of the products and services are generated locally. There's a lot more farm tourism now because of the improved environment. And we have a local office. So all the work is captured locally. This is my office. We have 6 people working in the program. They're not working in the city with the ministry. They're working in the local area with the farmers. So there's a lot of local economic impact. Socially, we've done a lot of farmer training. It's really brought a lot of people together. We have events every month for the last 10 years, walks or talks, which are often led by the farmer. So that's been a really important social outcome. I know we had Siggy and Borgar with us last year at a big festival, which is celebrating the importance of farming in the burren to this landscape. So I think the project has a big impact in making farming relevant again to farmers and to society, because we're saying that farmers, we need to value them as food producers, but also as custodians and stewards of the countryside. And that's worked really well for farmers and for the public. So just to finish off, I'm telling a story about a particular place called the Burren, where we've worked for 20 years, but it's the same story in many, many parts of Europe. So right now, we have a climate crisis, we have a biodiversity crisis in Europe, even though we spend billions of euros trying to improve farmland biodiversity and climate. All of the indicators seem to be negative all the time. So we've got a problem. I think part of the solution to that problem is farmers. And I think we need to recognize, support, and reward farmers, almost like as first responders to our climate and biodiversity crisis. We all know the problem that bad farming can produce, but we also need to think about the solutions that good farming can deliver. Here's an example from Spain where I visited last year. This farmer, he makes his living from grazing herds of sheep near Barcelona in order to prevent forest fires. So around Barcelona, there's less farming, there's more tourism, and there's a warmer summers. There's more fires every year, which is a huge problem and a huge expense. But by paying this farmer a modest amount of money, he's delivering an ecosystem service called fire prevention at a tiny cost to the taxpayer. But we need many, many more people like this across Europe to address these crises. In Ireland, we've done a lot of work in this. So at the moment, we have lots of projects in different parts of Ireland, which are led by farmers. So the farmer and the scientists come together to come up with a solution to the local environmental challenge, and then they deliver that solution at a local level. And that's been very successful across Ireland, and it's hopefully our new way of working. So my kind of message is that if we think about farmers as not a problem, but as an opportunity or as a resource, then we also need to design programs that appeal to these farmers, that motivate these farmers, that stimulate these farmers. And from working with farmers, my lessons have been that if we have these schemes at a local level, if they're practical and relevant to the farmer, they're much more powerful and impactful. Secondly, for farmers, money is important, but it's really about how fair that money is. Farmers, if you give two farmers the same amount of money, one farmer does a lot, the other farmer does nothing, then that money is worth nothing to that farmer because there's no value to it. So in my experience, farmers appreciate money which is paid for on a result basis. So the more the farmer does for us, the more money we pay, and farmers really like this model. Another thing when working with farmers that is really important is flexibility and freedom to farm. And this is also important for nature. A lot of our programs in the past have been by calendar date, saying on this date you must do this, on this date you must do that. This is bad for the farmer and this is bad for the environment, I think. So in our program, we give total flexibility to the farmer to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it. We judge him on the result, and this works very well. Another important design principle is that we take away all the paperwork. So for us, we have a simple sheet every year which the farmer signs to claim his payment for his scores, and a simple sheet that the farmer signs to claim his payment for the work that's been done. Everything else we take care of in the office. Finally, I think it's important that the language is positive, that we see the potential of farmers and that farmers' voice is heard as well. So just to talk, to wind down, in my experience, my big job in this picture here is trying to motivate farmers to deliver more ecosystem services. So this is our main purpose, our main focus. And after 20 years, I think to do this, we need to do three things. We need to pay farmers, obviously, to deliver these services. So we need to tell farmers what we want them to deliver and pay them when to deliver that. So we've got some really good examples of that now from Ireland and from Europe that we'd be happy to share with you. The second thing is, how do you do this? How do you farm for nature? How do you deliver ecosystem services? What ecosystem services should you deliver? And this is where we need a lot of technical support. If you're a beef farmer, you get a lot of advice on beef production. If you're a dairy farmer, you get a lot of advice as well. If you want to produce ecosystem services, you need research, advice, and support. So there's a really important role for farm advisors in this. And I know Siggy and Berger are aware of that. And again, we've got really good models on how to do that at a local level. But the third piece, which is really important, is about the heart. I think we really need to persuade farmers that farming for nature, farming to deliver environmental outcomes is the right thing to do. We need to convince them to believe in this, that this is worth doing. Because in our experience, when a farmer understands and is bought into the idea of farming for nature and ecosystem services, he does it so much better. Same as any of us in any of our work. And again, we've got good examples of how to create that engagement through different projects over the years. So that's what I wanted to say in 30 minutes. I know it's a lot of information and you probably have a lot of questions, maybe not now, but further down the line. So I've included here a lot of links. I'm happy to share the presentation through Siggy, or if you want in future, maybe in a few weeks or months, to come back and ask more detailed questions, I'd be happy to do that. But for the moment, I'll leave it at that, Siggy, and hand back to you.
Thank you, Brendan. This was an excellent presentation, and I think we can learn a lot from you. I have one question myself right away.
Okay.
How did you, when you were starting this project, how did you convince farmers to come and work with you?
That's a good question, and an important one, and it's a challenge that a lot of projects in Ireland have experienced. How do you get started? How do you get farmers on board? So, in our case, the initial research was done with the farmer together. So it was me as a researcher speaking with farmers, building up relationships. For farmers, a lot of it is about trust. It's about building up a relationship of trust with somebody. And I think maybe your organization has probably got some good relationships on the ground with farmers. And using that trust, it's saying to the farmer, look, let's try this. There's an opportunity here. It's not going to negatively affect you. It's going to be a possible way of improving your environmental outcomes, possibly improving your income, helping you to sell your food or your services, maybe to society, because these environmental services now are becoming more relevant. So, and then once the farmer agrees maybe to work with you, making sure to involve the farmer in developing the programs, the ideas, the solutions. I really like the idea of the farmer and the scientists together co-creating solutions and sharing them, demonstrating them. So to summarize, Siggy, what we did is we spent a lot of time speaking with farmers. We asked 20 of those farmers to maybe work with us fairly closely, and then use those farmers to demonstrate to other farmers as to how these things, you know, they're good for farming, they can be really good for farming. It's worth trying them out. And the final thing I'd say is that we've been working with some of these farmers for 20 years. Some of them have not changed. Some of them are still the same. But gradually, every year, by working with them and by being patient, more and more farmers come on board and deliver more and more all the time. So it's a big challenge, but I think by building those relationships of trust and by bringing the farmers along in the design process of the solution, I think you can achieve a lot.
Okay, thank you. Ekki einhverju fleiri spurningar sem einhver vill koma með fram? Það má koma jafnt á íslensku og ensku, hérna. Þýðum þá bara.
Má ég spyrja?
Já, endilega.
Hello, my name is Ingibjörg. I work for the Environment Agency of Iceland. Thank you very much for this good lecture. It's very interesting. My question is regarding the payments and the score sheets. If a farmer doesn't agree with the results, if he thinks he has done a better job or that he should get more payments, what resources does he have? How do you process that conflict?
Yes, thanks, Ingborg. That's a question that many people have asked. It was a big concern in the beginning with the result-based approach. So there's maybe 3 answers I can give you to that. And I'll begin by saying that we've been running this for 10 years. Every year we say to farmers, please, 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 if you're not happy with your score, come to our office and talk to us. Every year, maybe 5 farmers out of 320 come to the office and challenge the score. And when they come to the office, I speak to them and I explain to them, showing the scoring system, exactly where the score comes from, why it's not a 10 instead of a 9. And usually they accept that. Almost all the time they accept that explanation because it's verifiable. You can show them where the score came from. And the second thing, Ingeborg, which is really important, is that we say to the farmer, look, by changing your management, you can improve your score next year. So by doing this or this, you can improve your score. And for farmers, this is really important, that they're not locked in to what they consider a low payment for many years, but that they can, by changing their activity, increase their payment. Now, the reason why we have so few appeals on the score is that we have a very good farm advisors who carry out the scoring. So they're very well trained and their scoring is very accurate. In addition to that, our team verify 20 to 30% of the scores every year. So we confirm the scores are accurate and our team are very well trusted by the farmer. And the third thing is that we designed the scoring system to be very, very simple and farmer friendly. So the farmers instinctively know what score they deserve. And as an example of that, we take farmers every year on field trips in the Burren to a farm. We walk from field to field, and I'll ask farmers to show what score they think this field should receive. But 90% of the farmers will accurately guess the score, and the other 10% will get it within 1 point. So the farmers understand the scoring system and they understand what the score should be. The advisors, the farm advisors, verify the score, and then we verify that again. And the last thing to say is that the ministry who pay for this scoring system, they also do a check to make sure that we do our job. So the scoring system is very robust, it's very farmer friendly, and the evidence of that is that, like I said, every year only a handful of farmers challenge their scores. And if they're correct, if we've made a mistake, we'll change the score, but it rarely happens. Maybe once every 2 or 3 years, we have to adjust the score.
Thank you. I have another question.
Good.
How are the farmers chosen, or do the farmers apply to participate in this project? Or how do they approach you to participate?
Yes. Initially, we had a limited amount of funding. We had €1 million per annum. Now we have more funding, so we have funding for every farmer at the moment, so it's not a problem. Initially, when we had limited funding, we asked farmers to apply, and we used a very simple application form, 1 page with the farmer's name and the herd number. That was all we required, and that was really important. We wanted to make it very simple for the farmer to apply. Using that information, we were able to select some criteria to select the farmers. So obviously farmers with more protected land give more value to the program. So that was one criterion, the amount of protected land that you had. Another criterion was your participation in previous environmental programs. This spoke about your track record of environmental management. Another criterion was the percentage of your land which was protected. So farmers in the core areas were more likely to get selected. Another criterion was the amount of archaeology on your land, listed monuments. So we wanted farmers to understand the value of archaeology and of biodiversity. So we had maybe 5 criteria, which were quite objective and could be assessed randomly. When we did those assessments, we offered places to 100 farmers. Maybe 80 of them decided, yeah, I want to join this program. And then the following year, we had some more budget left over, so we offered more places and more places until we had a budget fully used up. So every year for 3 years, we had a round of offerings for farmers until we had our project full. But the selection was based on those criteria that I just outlined.
Thank you.
And just one additional thing to that, Ingeborg, I think our ministry had concerns about, well, how do we know the budget of this program? If it's based on results, how do we know the results and therefore the budget? By having a phased approach, so every year we took on a tranche of farmers and then maybe a little bit more and a little bit more, we were able to manage the budget very effectively. So for instance, in the first 6 years, by taking in more farmers, we were able to spend to within 1% of our allocated budget. Even though we couldn't anticipate in future what the spend would be, we were able to bring it within 1% of the target by taking in phases of farmers.
Má ég spyrja?
Já, gjörðu svo vel.
Yes, hi, my name is Iðunn and I work for the Soil Conservation Service of Iceland. I'm sorry I missed the beginning, but I was just wondering, do we have, because you showed a lot of project in the end, do you have a special project for wetland management?
We don't have a lot of wetland habitat here, but we have some of our other projects in Ireland, some of our sister projects deal with wetlands. So in cases of wetlands, what we have is a scorecard for wetland habitats, for instance, grasslands. We have a scorecard for that. We have another project where we have a payment structure, which is designed to reward a farmer for his water catchment management. So we have in the Burren, in my project, we don't have many wetlands, but in similar projects in Ireland, which have developed in the last few years, we have scorecards and result-based payments for wetlands and also for soil condition and different things like that I'd be happy to share with you.
Yeah, thank you. So it's more like a water quality connecting to the wetland.
Yeah, well, actually two things. One is we have a wetland scorecard for biodiversity. So we have a simple scorecard for looking at certain indicator species which show a good quality wetland, which is well managed. But separately to that, we have a scorecard in another project which looks at the whole farm, and it looks at how well the farm is managed to reduce pollution to the waterways, and it looks at point source pollution. So that's kind of a whole farm approach. So we have two different approaches to wetland management in this result-based framework.
Okay, thank you.
Trausti Baldursson. I work for the Icelandic Institute of Natural History. You mentioned twice when the farmers are applying, you look at whether the land is protected or not. Does it have to be protected, or does it have to have some other values that you already know of, although it's not protected by law?
Yes, that's a very good question, Trausti. The reason we used protected land initially was because it's easy to do a desktop exercise selecting farmers based on protected land. So if we have a farmer's herd number, we can show how much of his land is protected, and therefore we can remotely judge whether or not he should get into the program. Now, once that farmer is in the program, we look at all species-rich habitat, grazed habitat on the farm. So some of the farm might be protected by law, and we'll work with that, but there might be areas on the farm which aren't protected, which are farmed and have high nature values, and we include those as well.
Okay.
And the other, Trustee, just an additional clarification, we have obviously different types of habitat here. You probably don't know some of the habitats, but the main habitat would be these orchid-rich calcareous grasslands.
Yeah.
These are kind of rough, rocky grasslands, which are very species-rich. But we also have some really important mesotrophic grasslands, almost like hay meadows. Now, these are very rare, so we have a higher price for these because they're quite rare and they're threatened with land improvement. And we also have a different scoring system for those types of grassland. And the scoring system for those mesotrophic meadow-like grasslands involves an ecological survey. So we do a survey every 3 or 4 years of these meadows. And using that survey, we identify the ecological quality of that grassland. And we use that score combined with the management score to determine the score for the field and therefore the payment. So we have a different scoring system and payment level depending on the habitat type, be it rough grassland, meadow, possibly wetland as well. So there's a good bit of variability like that.
So you look at the habitat annexes or habitat type annexes in the Habitat Directive?
Yes, as well. Yeah.
Einhver kannski ein spurning í lokin?
If I just might add, Siggy, so I can imagine some of you sitting here thinking, is this relevant to what we do in Iceland? I really think it is. So if you take what we're talking about is high nature value farmland, and I know you've got a lot of that in Iceland. So these are farmland whose biodiversity values, maybe cultural values, depend on a continuation of certain types of positive farming activity. So what we're trying to share here is our approach to motivating farmers to manage the land in a way that will deliver better environmental outcomes. And I'm convinced, having worked with farmers, that we need to put a value on those ecosystem services, be they biodiversity or water quality, because these are public goods and services that will cost the farmer in many cases to deliver. So we have to put a value on them. And by putting a value on them for the farmer, it's like bringing your animal to the market. You get a higher price for better condition. Farmers understand that very well, that the better the condition, the more money I get. And when farmers recognize that, then they seek out the information from the scientists, from the farm advisor as to how to manage the land in a certain way. They innovate in terms of how to do that. They're proud of the result. If they can improve their score, they can boast about it to their fellow farmers. And I think it helps them to diversify their farm income. So I think at a very basic level, what we're trying to do here, put a value on the environment and support farmers to deliver better environmental outcomes. I think that lesson is relevant no matter where you are in the world. And for us, the action-based approach, just saying to a farmer, fix that or do this or do that, it doesn't work because it doesn't take account of the variability of the farm or of the sensibility of the farmer who likes being independent and free to choose. So I think if you bear that in mind, what do we need to do to motivate the farmer to deliver these better environmental outcomes? I think then this type of approach will make more sense.
Seems to be sensible.
And it works, Trausti. That's the good thing. We've got really strong data over 10 years in like one of the most complex landscapes ecologically in Ireland. So we've kept it very simple and it does work. We've got data to show that it does work. Now, the lovely thing about it as well is that we have 350 farmers. All of the farmers are doing different things in different ways at different times, and nature loves this. Some of the farmers do very little. They haven't changed that much, but they're still delivering outcomes for nature, but we're not paying them so much because, well, we don't have to. They don't want to do work, that's fine, but they're still delivering something. So this approach really enables that diversity at farm level and gives the farmers freedom to do things in their own way.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan. This has been really great to have you, and I think we should maybe stop now and digest what you have been talking about.
Good.
But yeah, thanks a lot, and takk kærlega þín sem að komu og hlustuðu á okkur. Við verðum með næsta fyrirlestur á föstudaginn og síðan áfram næstu viku. En já, takk kærlega. Thank you, Brendan. We will be in contact.
Thank you, Siggy. Thanks for the invitation and best of luck with your work. I hope to see you over here again sometime.
Yeah, I hope so, and we have to have you here in Iceland, hopefully soon.
I look forward to it.
All right, thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.